The starving flame had not accepted a living hand since Dragon King Vaelor's elder brother touched it and turned black before dawn. Not burned, blackened, as if the royal fire had not consumed him, but found nothing left inside him worth feeding on. So when the dragon court dragged a slave girl barefoot across the Ember Hall and ordered her to hold that same flame, every noble understood the punishment. They were not testing her worth. They were feeding her to the kingdom's hunger. Mira knelt on the obsidian floor with bronze shackles around her wrists, her palms raw from scrubbing dragon ash out of temple drains no noble feet would ever touch. Above her, the Ember Hall rose in black pillars and red glass, each wall carved with ancient dragons biting their own tails. Fire ran through channels in the floor like molten veins, but tonight those veins looked thin, uneven, sickly. At the far end of the hall, the dragon throne stood cracked from root to crown, glowing faintly beneath a skin of old gold. And before that throne, inside a bowl of black stone, burned the starving flame. It was smaller than Mira expected. That frightened her more. A royal fire should have roared. It should have climbed toward the ceiling and painted every noble face in gold. This flame bent low inside its basin, blue-white at the heart, gray at the edges, thin as a breath trapped in a dying chest. But it was not only dying. Mira saw that before anyone spoke of judgment. Something around the flame was eating it. Not visibly. Not like teeth. More like absence. The light thinned at the edges where no wind touched it, pulled inward by unseen mouths. Each time a noble behind the throne whispered a prayer of loyalty, the flame flickered weaker, as if devotion itself had become poison. Mira looked away quickly. Slaves, who noticed royal sickness, rarely lived long enough to be thanked. High Flame Counselor Orinth stood beside the basin, tall and narrow in crimson robes stitched with gold thread. His beard was black, his hands ringed with rubies, and his smile had the gentle patience of a man who had never been punished for cruelty because he called it law. Mira of the Ash Cells, he announced. That was not a name. It was a location. She had been brought to the palace as a child, after her mother died in the lower mines, sold with a debt mark burned into her shoulder and a chain record instead of a family line. The court had never needed to know who she was. Slaves were counted by where they slept, what they owed, and how long their bodies remained useful. Mira lifted her head. A few nobles laughed softly. They enjoyed that most, the way the powerless sometimes forgot they were expected to look broken. You are accused of contaminating the lower flame stores, Orinth said. 3 royal braziers failed to answer the king's command this morning. Such failure is treason against dragon blood. Mira's mouth went dry. I did not touch the royal braziers. No, Orinth said kindly. You touched the ash drains beneath them. You carried soot from the eastern furnace. You were seen near the oil jars before sunrise. And this was found beneath your sleeping mat. He lifted one hand. A guard stepped forward with a strip of burned linen held between iron tongs. Mira's stomach dropped. The linen was marked with a crude ash symbol, a broken dragon coil crossed by 3 black lines, the sign of flame poisoners. Everyone knew it from court punishments and temple warnings. Everyone also knew a slave caught with that mark did not need a trial. Mira stared at it, horrified. That is not mine. Orinth's eyes softened with false pity. A tragic answer, always the first one, the nobles murmured. Mira looked desperately toward the lower servants gathered near the side pillars. Most dropped their eyes. One old man did not. Yarek, the drain master. His face was gray, his lips cracked, and 2 guards held him upright, as if his bones had forgotten how to stand. Mira had spoken to him that morning beneath the king's private braziers. He had warned her in a shaking whisper not to scrub too deeply near the sealed vents. Some fires are not dying, girl. Some are being eaten. Now he looked as if those words had cost him blood. Orinth followed her gaze and smiled. Drain? Master Jarek has already testified. Mira stared at the old man. Jarek? The guards tightened their grip. Jarek's eyes filled with panic. His mouth opened. For one breath, Mira thought he would save her. Then he coughed black ash onto his own chest. A low hiss moved through the court. Jarek forced out the words as if each one had hooks in it. I saw her, he rasped. She carried the marked cloth. She poured gray oil into the drains. Mira shook her head slowly. No. His eyes begged her forgiveness even as his mouth betrayed her. She spoke against royal fire, Jarek whispered. She said starving flames deserve to die. Orinth placed a gentle hand on the old man's shoulder. Jarek screamed. It was not loud. His throat was too damaged for that. But his body arched as heat pulsed beneath his skin, lighting his veins red for an instant before fading. Mira understood then. He had not testified. He had been burned into saying what Orinth needed. Beyond Orinth, Dragon King Vaelor sat on the cracked throne. He had not spoken. He looked carved from the same black stone beneath her knees, tall, broad-shouldered, armored in dark scale mail, one hand resting on the throne, as if holding back something larger than his body. His hair was black, bound loosely behind his neck. His eyes were gold, but not warm. Dragon gold. Molten. Watchful. Dangerous enough that even the nobles nearest him kept careful distance. Mira had seen him before only from the edges of hallways, surrounded by flame priests and winged guards. The kingdom whispered that his dragon had not fully risen since his brother's death. Others whispered the throne was rejecting him. No one whispered where servants could hear twice. Now his gaze rested on Jarek. Then on Mira, not with mercy. Not yet. With suspicion, sharpened by exhaustion. Vaelor's voice stopped the hall. Let the Drainmaster speak without your hand on him. Orinth's fingers remained on Jarek's shoulder a moment too long. Then, he released him. Jarek collapsed to his knees, trembling. Vaelor leaned forward slightly. Did she poison the drains? Yarek's lips shook. Orinth's eyes lowered toward him. The old man looked at Mira once. Terror filled his face. Then, barely audible, he whispered, The fire is being eaten from above. Silence fell. Orinth's expression went still. Jarek smiled weakly, as if that one sentence had returned something of himself. Then his eyes filled with blue-white flame. Mira lunged before she knew she had moved. No! The guards caught her. Jarek burned from within, without a torch touching him. No smoke rose. No fire spread. His skin turned translucent, lit by dragon fire behind his ribs, and then he folded onto the obsidian floor in a heap of ash and bone. The court recoiled. Orinth sighed as if deeply wounded. Poison guilt often devours the lesser conspirator first. Mira could not stop staring at what remained of Jarek. The man had lied to save himself, then died to speak one truth. The flame in the basin shivered. Dragon King Vaelor stood. The cracked throne pulsed behind him. Enough, he said. Orinth bowed. Your Majesty, the evidence is now beyond dispute. Marked cloth beneath her mat. Poisoned drains under her charge. Treasonous speech. A dead accomplice consumed by the very corruption he helped spread. It consumed him after he contradicted you. A dangerous stillness moved through the Ember Hall. Orinth lifted his head. Are you suggesting your counselor fears a slave's innocence? Vaelor's eyes burned brighter. I am suggesting I dislike convenient ashes. Mira looked at him despite herself. She hated that hope rose. Hope was a cruel thing in a hall built by kings. Orinth turned toward the nobles behind the throne. Several of them lifted their chins, their jewels shining in the weak royal light. Mira saw one lord touch the gold oath chain at his throat. The starving flame flickered lower the moment his fingers closed around it. Again, the flame was being eaten, and this time Vaelor saw her see it. Their eyes met across the basin. Something passed between them. Not trust, not softness, but a shared recognition that the room itself was lying. Then Orinth raised his voice. By old dragon law, any hand accused of starving royal fire may be judged by the starving flame. If the hand is false, the fire will consume it. If the heart is loyal, the flame will know. A murmur passed through the nobles. Mira looked at the basin. The blue-white flame bent toward her, just slightly, as if scenting. Her chains rattled when the guards forced her upright. "I am not royal," she said. The hall went silent. Orinth's smile thinned. "No one claimed you were. Then why would royal fire know my heart?" A dangerous pause followed. Mira realized too late that she had asked a question no slave was meant to ask aloud. Vaelor's fingers tightened. One crack in the golden armrest widened beneath his hand. Orinth stepped closer to her. "Because all flame knows filth." The nobles laughed then, quietly, safely. Mira did not lower her head. She had learned long ago that obedience could save the body, but it could not always save the soul. Sometimes the only thing left to keep was the angle of one's chin. Orinth saw it and nodded to the guards. They dragged her to the basin. Heat should have struck her. It did not. The closer she came, the colder her fingers became, as if the flame were not burning outward, but starving inward. The blue-white center trembled. Thin gray smoke curled from it and reached toward her wrists like a creature too weak to stand. Mira tried not to shake. She failed. The court saw. Their pleasure returned. "Hands out," Orinth ordered. Mira looked once at Vaelor. She hated herself for it. He was the king. His law had chained her. His court had dragged her here. His throne had cracked while children starved in ash cells below his palace. Whatever suspicion lived in his eyes did not change the fact that he sat above her while she was forced toward fire. Still, he looked at her hands, not at her chains. Hair hands, raw, burned in small places, scarred from years of ash and boiling water. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. Then the starving flame made a sound. A whimper. Every noble went still. Orinth's face tightened. "Proceed." Mira held out her hands. The guards shoved them over the basin. The flame rose. For a moment, it became bright enough to paint the hall in blue-white light. Mira braced herself for agony, for skin splitting, for bone turning black beneath dragon judgment. The fire touched her palms and curled around her fingers like a starving animal finding warmth. Mira stopped breathing. It did not burn. It clung. A thin tongue of flame slid between her fingers, trembling, almost pleading. Another looped around her wrist. The bronze shackles hissed, then cracked open and fell smoking to the floor. The ember hall erupted. Witchcraft. Impossible. Pull her back. No slave survives royal fire. Mira stared at her hands. The flame was feeding, not on her flesh, on something beneath her skin she had never known how to name. Vaelor stepped down from the throne. Orinth stepped back, too quickly. The starving flame noticed. The blue-white fire lifted its head from Mira's palms and turned toward the dais, not toward the king, past him, toward the nobles standing behind his throne. One lord screamed before the flame touched him, his eyes filled with dragon fire. Then another noble doubled over, fire glowing behind his ribs, as if something inside him had been hollowed and lit. The flame leapt from Mira's hands, not leaving her, but stretching through the air like a chain of hungry light. It struck the shadows behind the throne. The loyal nobles began to burn from within. Mira stood barefoot in the center of the ember hall, terrified, untouched, her hands full of blue-white fire. Dragon King Vaelor turned slowly from the burning traitors to her. For the first time, the dangerous king looked afraid, not of the flame, of what it had chosen. And from the cracked throne behind him, a starving dragon opened one golden eye. The first noble burned without flame, touching his skin. Lord Aaron stood behind the dragon throne with both hands over his chest, eyes wide, mouth open, dragon fire glowing behind his ribs, as if something inside him had awakened too late and found itself guilty. The blue-white flame stretched from Mira's palms across the hall in a thin, hungry ribbon. It did not devour his flesh. It entered through the gold oath chain at his throat and drank whatever had been hidden there. Erend screamed once. Then the oath chain snapped. The flame recoiled from him, brighter than before. Mira staggered as it fed through her. Not pain. Not exactly. It felt like a starving child, gripping her bones for balance. She wanted to pull her hands away, but the fire had wrapped around her fingers, trembling with a need so old it seemed almost human. Another noble behind the throne dropped to his knees. Then a third. Their eyes glowed dragonfire. Their shadows thrashed against the cracked gold at the base of Vaelor's throne, as if something beneath the dais had been drinking from them, and now hated being discovered. Dragon King Vaelor stepped between Mira and the burning nobles. The flame did not strike him. It split around his body like water around stone, refusing to touch his armor. That terrified the court more than if it had attacked him. Vaelor looked from the flame to Mira. "Why does it obey you?" Mira could barely breathe. "It does not." Orinth's voice cut through the panic. "She lies. The slave commands forbidden fire." Vaelor did not look away from her. "If she commanded it, counselor, it would have burned me first." The words silenced the hall. Mira saw Orinth's fingers close around the ruby ring on his left hand. The starving flame saw it too. A thin tongue of blue-white fire snapped toward the ring. Orinth jerked his hand back, and the flame missed by a hair's width. His face remained composed, but the movement betrayed him. The Dragon King's eyes narrowed. "What is that ring?" Vaelor asked. "A council seal. Remove it." Orinth smiled. "Your Majesty, surely you do not ask your highest flame, counselor, to strip before a slave's trick. I asked you to remove a ring." The hall turned deadly quiet. Mira felt the flame shiver at the king's command. Not with fear, with hope. Orinth slowly pulled the ruby ring from his finger. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the starving flame lunged. It struck the exposed skin beneath the ring, not burning, but biting into an invisible line wrapped around Orinth's hand. Blue-white fire flashed, and a black thread appeared beneath his skin, running from his finger up his wrist and under the sleeve of his crimson robe. Vaelor's face hardened. "What oath is that?" Orinth closed his fist. "An old protection vow." The flame hissed. Mira heard words inside it, then not spoken, not whispered, but tasted. Poisoned loyalty. She flinched. Vaelor saw. "What did it tell you?" "I don't know. Do not soften it for him." His voice was rough, but not cruel. That frightened her more than cruelty would have. Cruel kings were easy to hate. Kings who listened made the heart careless. Mira swallowed. "It said his loyalty is poisoned." The nobles erupted. Orinth lifted his burned hand. "Enough! A slave girl repeats the hunger of a corrupted flame, and my king listens as if she were a priestess. This is how kingdoms fall." Vaelor stepped closer to him. "No. Kingdoms fall when trusted men fear being tested." The cracked throne groaned behind him. From inside it came the sound Mira had heard at the end of the fire's choosing. A dragon breathing through stone. Weak, starving, alive. Vaelor turned toward the throne, and for the first time his control broke. Not much. Only enough for Mira to see the wound beneath his power. "That is not possible," he whispered. Orinth's eyes flashed. "Your Majesty." The flame in Mira's hands suddenly tightened. A vision burst across the obsidian floor. Mira saw the throne chamber years earlier. Vaelor kneeling before the starving flame beside another man with the same black hair and golden eyes, his elder brother, Prince Arl. The prince placed his hand above the flame. The fire turned black, not because it judged him unworthy, but because dark threads from the nobles behind him pulled the heat out of it. Auril collapsed. his skin blackening while Orinth stood behind him with the ruby ring glowing on his hand. The vision shattered. The court went silent. Vaelor stared at Orinth, as if the man had just killed his brother again. "You told me Auril failed the flame." Orinth's jaw tightened. "He did. You drained it. I preserved the throne from a prince too weak to see his own counsel rotting." The starving flame flared in Mira's hands. Furious now, Orinth pointed at her. "And now it chooses a slave because it is desperate. Not wise. Desperate. Kill the vessel, and the corruption ends." Several dragon knights moved toward Mira. Vaelor's head turned slowly. The air changed. "Take one more step," he said, "and I will show this court what royal fire still remembers." The knights froze. Mira looked at him, startled despite herself. The flame curled higher around her wrists, not burning, but binding her to the truth she had never asked to carry. Then the cracked dragon throne split open another inch. A golden eye stared from within, not at Vaelor, at Mira, and the starving flame whispered through her blood. "Feed me truth, Ember-Vow child. Feed me truth, Ember-Vow child." Mira did not know the name, but her blood did. The moment the starving flame whispered it, something beneath her skin answered with a pulse so deep it seemed to come from a life before memory. The blue-white fire wrapped higher around her wrists, not like chains, but like starving fingers, clinging to the only warmth left in the hall. Vaelor saw it. So did Orinth. The counselor's face changed so quickly most of the court might have missed it. Mira did not. Slaves learned to read fear in powerful men because fear was the moment before they struck. "Ember-Vow," Orinth said softly. "That bloodline burned out centuries ago." The flame hissed. Mira looked at him. "Then why are you afraid?" The hall went still. Her own courage startled her. She had spoken to him not as a slave defending herself, but as someone the fire had named in front of kings. Vaelor stepped closer to her, though his eyes remained on Orinth. "What is Ember-Vow?" Orinth's mouth tightened. "A dead heresy. Fire servants who believed loyalty could be tasted by flame. They were purged because their magic turned courts against themselves, or because they made traitors difficult to hide," Mira said. The flame brightened around her hands. A faint sound moved beneath the throne. Not a roar, a breath. The starving dragon inside the cracked gold was listening. Vaelor turned toward the throne. His face looked carved from grief. "If my dragon lives inside that stone, why has it not answered me?" Orinth lifted his chin. "Because it rejects weakness." The starving flame lunged. Vaelor caught Orinth by the throat before the fire reached him. The movement was so fast the court gasped after it happened. The Dragon King's claws had not emerged, but the strength in his hand was enough to bend Orinth backward. "Say that again," Vaelor said. Orinth did not struggle. That was what made him dangerous. Even with the king's hand at his throat, he looked like a man arranging pieces on a board. "Your dragon began starving after Prince Auril died," he rasped. "You could not raise it. You could not feed the royal flame. You needed the council because your blood was no longer enough." Vaelor's fingers tightened. Mira felt the starving flame recoil from the words. Not because they were true, but because they were poison it had been fed too often. "He has been saying that to you for years," she whispered. Vaelor's eyes flicked to her. Mira wished she had stayed silent, but the fire would not let the taste leave her tongue. "That is how it feels," she said, voice quieter. Like the flame has swallowed the same lie so many times, it almost forgot it was starving. Something dark moved across Vaelor's expression. Not anger at her. Recognition. Behind him, the cracked throne pulsed. A low golden light spread through one fracture, then faded as three nobles behind the dais clutched their oath chains at the same time. The light thinned. Instantly. Sucked backward through invisible threads. Mira pointed before fear could stop her. "There, Vaelor released Orinth and turned. The nobles froze. One was Lord Sayre, master of the Western armies. One was Lady Caressa, keeper of royal tribute. The third was a flame priest with gold ash painted across his brow. Each wore an oath chain. Each chain glowed black at the clasp. Vaelor's voice dropped. "Remove them." Lord Sayre bowed stiffly. "Your Majesty, these chains bind us to your protection." The starving flame snarled. Mira flinched as the sound tore through her palms. "No," she said. "They bind him to your hunger." The words were not hers alone. They came with the fire. The flame shot from her hands to the 3 oath chains. This time it did not wait for permission. Blue-white fire wrapped the gold links and pulled. The nobles screamed. The chains did not break. They opened. From each clasp spilled a thin stream of stolen dragonfire, gold turning black as it poured through the air and into the cracked throne, not to heal it, but to trap the starving dragon deeper inside. Vaelor stared. For the first time, the court saw the betrayal, not as accusation, but as light moving in front of their eyes. The flame drank the blackened streams. Mira cried out as the fire surged through her body. Too much. Too fast. The hunger inside the flame widened, dragging stolen heat back through her bones. Her knees buckled. Vaelor caught her before she hit the floor. His hands closed around her arms, hot and careful. The court vanished for one breath. Mira saw only his face above hers, gold eyes burning with fury and something more dangerous than fury. "Concern. Let go of the flame," he ordered. "I can't." "Then let it take from me." Orinth's head snapped up. "Your Majesty?" "No." Vaelor ignored him. He placed one bare hand over Mira's burning palms. The starving flame recoiled. Not from unworthiness, from fear. Mira felt it clearly. The flame wanted his fire, but something had been wound around him so tightly that feeding from him might kill what remained of his dragon. Her eyes widened. "They did not only drain your throne." Vaelor went still. The flame crawled over his wrist, revealing black lines beneath his skin, thin as cracks in glass. Mira whispered, "They tied the hunger to your heart." The court erupted. Orinth shouted above them, "Lies! She invents what she cannot understand." The starving dragon inside the throne answered. Its golden eye opened wider. Then the cracked gold split from crown to base. A claw, enormous and skeletal with dying fire, pressed through the throne from within. Vaelor turned slowly, the dragon's eye fixed on Mira. Not pleading now, commanding. The starving flame rose between her hands in the shape of a small blue-white dragon, and with a voice like fire scraping bone, it spoke aloud to the court. "Bring me the oath that chained my king. Bring me the oath that chained my king." The words did not come from Mira. They came through her. Every flame in the Ember Hall bent toward the small blue-white dragon hovering above her palms. Its body was no larger than a hunting hawk, thin and translucent, ribs made of light, wings torn at the edges like burning silk. Yet when it spoke, even the oldest nobles lowered their heads as if a mountain-sized beast had risen behind them. Vaelor's hand remained over Mira's. She could feel his pulse through the fire. Too fast, too controlled. A king's body trained not to show pain even while something inside him bled. Orinth recovered first. "There is no oath." The little flame dragon turned its head toward him. Its eyes were empty blue stars. "Liar." The word struck the counselor hard enough that the ruby rings on his fingers cracked. Mira gasped as the starving flame surged brighter. It was feeding on truth now, but truth was not gentle. Each revealed lie pulled heat through her body, making her bones feel hollow and bright. Vaelor saw her flinch. His fingers tightened slightly around hers. "Use me." "No, that was not a request." She looked up at him, anger cutting through fear. "And I am not another thing in this hall for a king to spend." For one heartbeat, his face went utterly still. Then something changed in his eyes. Not softness, respect. Sharp and dangerous. Then tell me how to keep you standing. Mira wanted to answer. The flame answered first. Find the first vow. The obsidian floor cracked beneath the basin. Lines of blue-white fire spread outward, not randomly, but in the shape of an ancient dragon coil. The burning path moved past Vaelor, past the cracked throne, and stopped at the feet of the 3 nobles whose oath chains had opened. Lord Sair tried to step back. The fire caught his shadow. Lady Caressa screamed before it touched her. The flame priest fell to his knees, whispering prayers that sounded less like worship and more like bargaining. Mira understood without knowing how. They are not the first. Vaelor turned toward Orinth. No, Mira said, breath shaking. He is not either. The hall froze. Orinth's eyes narrowed. The starving flame curled around Mira's wrists and pulled her gaze toward the throne itself. Not the cracked gold, not the skeletal claw still pressing through the split. Beneath the dragon throne, hidden behind layers of royal fire, was a black seam shaped like a closed mouth. Vaelor followed her stare. What is under my throne? Orinth's voice sharpened. History. Vaelor smiled without warmth. I have learned tonight that history usually means a grave, with better manners. He stepped toward the dais. The flame dragon hissed. Not there. Mira swallowed. It wants the oath brought to it. Where? The little dragon folded its burning wings and pointed one claw toward the highest balcony of the Ember Hall, toward the Hall of Vows, the place where every noble house swore loyalty to the Dragon King before touching royal fire. Orinth's face darkened. No slave enters the Hall of Vows. Vaelor turned slowly. Then she enters as my witness. The court erupted. Mira felt the words hit the room harder than the fire had. Witness. Not accused. Not slave. Witness. Orinth lifted his chin. You cannot elevate Ashcell property by sentence. Vaelor's eyes burned gold. I can elevate anyone whose hands hold the only flame in this hall that has not lied to me. For a moment, no one moved. Then Mira took one step. The flame moved with her. The guards parted. Not from respect, from survival. Vaelor walked beside her, close enough that his heat pressed against her left side, not close enough to trap her. Mira hated that she noticed, hated more that some part of her, terrified and exhausted, steadied near him. At the base of the balcony stairs, Orinth spoke. Your Majesty, if you open the first vow before the court, you may not like what it demands. Vaelor did not stop. I have liked very little tonight. The first vow was made before your line took the throne. That stopped him. The starving flame trembled in Mira's hands. Vaelor looked back. Explain. Orinth's smile returned. Thin and cruel. Dragon kings are not born unbound. They are made useful. The first vow teaches the flame whom to feed and whom to starve. The skeletal claw inside the throne scraped against gold. A low, agonized sound filled the hall. Mira understood then. The oath had not merely chained Vaelor. It had taught the royal fire to distrust its own king. She climbed the stairs faster. The Hall of Vows waited above, sealed by bronze doors carved with kneeling dragons. Mira had cleaned those doors for years. She had never been allowed to touch the handles. Now, when she lifted her burning palm, the doors opened by themselves. Inside, thousands of oath ribbons hung from the ceiling, red, gold, and black, each tied to a noble house. At the center of the chamber stood a stone cradle of flame with one ribbon sealed beneath glass. The first vow. It was not gold. It was gray. Mira stepped toward it. The starving flame in her hands went silent. Vaelor entered behind her and stopped. His face changed. Not with fear. With recognition. That is my brother's seal. Mira looked down. The gray ribbon beneath the glass was stained black at one end, as if a dying hand had burned it while trying to pull free. Orinth appeared in the doorway below them. voice cold as iron. "Prince Auril did not die because we betrayed him," he said. "He died because he discovered the Dragon King was never meant to be fed by loyalty." The glass over the first vow cracked. Mira's flame dragon opened its mouth. "Read it." And as the gray ribbon uncurled beneath her hands, Vaelor's dragon screamed inside the throne. The gray ribbon uncurled beneath Mira's hands. At first, the words were not letters. They were burns. Thin black scars crossed the oath fabric in looping lines, as if someone had written the first vow with a blade heated in dragon fire. The starving flame hovered above Mira's palms in the shape of a small blue-white dragon, utterly still now. Waiting. Vaelor stood beside her, one hand braced against the stone cradle of flame. Below them, the Ember Hall had gone silent. Every noble, guard, and priest stared up toward the Hall of Vows, as though the balcony had become an execution platform. Mira looked at the first line. Her throat tightened. "To preserve the throne, royal fire shall feed not from love, but from obedience." Vaelor went still. The flame dragon trembled. Mira read the next line, though every instinct in her begged her to stop. "To preserve obedience, the Dragon King shall be bound to the vows of those who kneel closest." A sound came from the cracked throne below. The starving dragon screamed again, but this time the scream carried shape. Not rage. Recognition. Vaelor's face had gone pale beneath the gold of his eyes. "Closest," he said. His gaze dropped to the nobles behind his throne. Orinth's mouth curved slightly. "Every kingdom is built on structure, Your Majesty." Mira kept reading. "If the king's fire grows beyond council command, his flame shall be divided among loyal houses. If his dragon refuses counsel, hunger shall teach it submission." The words burned brighter as she spoke. One by one, the oath ribbons hanging from the ceiling began to twitch. Red, gold, black, thousands of noble vows reacting like sleeping snakes. Mira understood then why the starving flame had looked so small. It had not been dying by accident. It had been starved by law, by design. Every noble oath had been tied like a mouth to the king's dragon, feeding from him whenever he resisted them. Vaelor stepped back from the ribbon, as if it had bitten him. "My brother found this." The gray ribbon pulsed. A vision rose from its burnt edge. Prince Auril stood in the Hall of Vows years earlier, one hand pressed to the same glass cover, his face drawn with horror. He looked like Vaelor, but younger in spirit, easier to wound. Behind him stood Orinth in crimson robes, speaking gently. "Your brother will be easier to guide," the younger Orinth said. "You ask too many questions." Auril turned. "You are starving the throne. We are protecting it from dragon pride." "You mean controlling it." Orinth's face hardened. The vision shifted. Auril was dragged before the starving flame in the Ember Hall. The court watched as he placed his hand over the royal fire. Black threads from the oath ribbons above the throne pulled through Orinth's ring and sank into the flame. Auril's skin turned black before dawn, not because he failed the test, because he had found the chain. The vision ended. Vaelor did not move. Mira saw the grief strike him without sound. His brother had not been weak, not unworthy, not rejected by royal flame. He had been murdered by a system disguised as duty. Orinth climbed the final steps into the Hall of Vows. "You should thank me," he said. "Auril would have shattered the council, and the houses would have shattered the realm. You survived because I made you useful before you became dangerous." Vaelor turned toward him. The air heated so quickly Mira's lungs tightened. "You made my dragon starve. I made your reign possible." The starving flame snarled. Mira's hands burned cold. The gray ribbon lifted from the cradle and wrapped once around her wrist. She gasped. Vaelor reached for it, but Mira shook her head. "Don't." The ribbon was not attacking her. It was showing her where the vow ended. The burnt fabric stretched from her wrist across the chamber, down through the balcony, past the throne. and into the oath chains of the nobles below. But one strand ran the opposite way. Not to the king. To Orinth. Mira stared at it. You are not just enforcing the first vow. Orinth's eyes sharpened. You are feeding from it. The flame dragon opened its wings. The ruby ring on Orinth's hand cracked completely, spilling black gold fire. Vaelor's voice dropped. How much of my fire have you taken? Orinth looked at him for a long moment. Then the mask fell. Enough to keep you dependent. Not enough to kill you. His gaze moved to Mira. Until she touched the flame, the nobles below began shouting. Some in fear, some in betrayal, some because they knew they had also been fed by the same theft, and now saw the knife turning toward them. Mira swayed as the gray ribbon tightened. The starving flame whispered inside her, break the first vow. She looked at the oath fabric, then at the thousands of ribbons trembling overhead. If I break it, what happens? Vaelor answered before Orinth could. The houses lose their claim on my fire, Orinth smiled. And the king's dragon, starved for years, may devour this entire hall the moment it is free. The truth of that landed hard. Below, the cracked throne groaned. A second golden claw tore through the stone. The starving dragon was waking. Vaelor looked at Mira, and for the first time, his fear was not hidden. Can you control it? Mira almost laughed. I could not control where I slept this morning. Something like pain crossed his face. Then he stepped close enough that the flame between them bent toward both of their hearts. Then do not control it, he said. Tell it the truth. Orinth lunged for the gray ribbon. Mira closed her fist. The starving flame exploded white. Every oath ribbon in the Hall of Vows caught fire at once, and beneath the throne the starving dragon began to rise. The Hall of Vows became a cage of burning ribbons. Red, gold, and black oaths twisted overhead, each one catching blue-white fire as the starving flame raced from Mira's hand into the roots of the kingdom's loyalty. Some ribbons burned clean and vanished into sparks. Others screamed. Those were the false ones. Below the balcony, nobles cried out as their oath chains split open across their throats. Black gold fire poured from them in thin streams, not outward, but back toward the cracked throne, as if every stolen piece of Vaelor's dragon had heard its body calling. The throne shattered. A massive golden head forced its way through stone, and old metal horns scraped raw, eyes sunken with years of hunger. The dragon was enormous, even half-buried. Its scales dulled to bronze, its wings trapped beneath the floor. Yet when it breathed, every flame in the palace bent toward it. Vaelor gripped the balcony rail. For the first time, the Dragon King looked less like a ruler watching a beast awaken, and more like a man seeing the part of himself he had been taught to fear. Mira, he said, voice rough. If it rises starving, it will burn everything. The little flame dragon in Mira's hands trembled. Orinth laughed, though blood ran from his cracked ruby ring. Listen to him. Even your king knows what dragon hunger does. Break the vow, and you save him only long enough to watch him become a monster. Mira looked down at the dragon beneath the throne, its golden eye fixed on her. Inside that gaze, she felt hunger, rage, pain, but beneath all of it, buried almost too deep to reach, was restraint. The dragon had been starving for years, yet it had not devoured the hall when it first opened its eye. It had waited for truth. Mira wrapped both hands around the burning gray ribbon. The first vow taught it to feed on obedience. Vaelor turned toward her, so we give it something else. Orinth's smile faltered. There is nothing else strong enough. Mira looked at the nobles below, at the servants pressed against the side doors, at Jarek's ash still staining the obsidian floor. There is. The flame in her palms pulsed. Restitution. The word entered the Hall of Vows like a blade no one had expected. Vaelor understood first. His eyes sharpened. Every house that fed from my fire returns what it took. Lady Caressa screamed from below. That will ruin us. Vaelor's gaze dropped to her. You were not ruined while slaves starved under your tribute ledgers. The starving flame flared brighter. Mira felt it approve. Orinth lunged then, not at Vaelor, but at Hair. His hand closed around the gray ribbon near her wrist. Black gold fire surged from his palm into the oath, trying to drag the first vow back under his command. Pain shot up Mira's arm. She nearly fell. Vaelor caught Orinth by the shoulder and hurled him against the bronze doors hard enough to dent them. But the counselor did not release the ribbon. His stolen fire twisted through it like poison through veins. You cannot rewrite the first vow with pity, Orinth snarled. Kings are not fed by kindness. Mira's knees struck the floor. The little flame dragon collapsed against her palms, flickering. Vaelor reached for the ribbon, but black fire lashed at his chest. He staggered, and the dragon below roared in agony. The spell around his heart was still tied to the first vow. If he tore it by force, it might tear him open with it. Mira saw that. So did Orinth. Choose, the counselor whispered. The slave or the king. The court below fell silent. Mira looked at Vaelor. His face was pale with pain, but his eyes were locked on hers. Do not save me by dying, he said. The words hit harder than a command, because he meant them. No one in that hall had ever told Mira her life weighed against a king's and did not lose by default. Her throat tightened. I am not dying for you, she said. She closed her hand around the starving flame. I am making them pay. Then she pressed the fire into the gray ribbon. Not as force, as witness. The flame rushed through the first vow and opened every oath tied to it. The hall of vows filled with images. Servants carrying tribute until their backs broke. Miners coughing ash into bloody cloth. Royal fire siphoned through gold chains. Vaelor alone at night, trying to summon a dragon that could barely breathe. Prince Oral turning black while Orinth watched. The dragon beneath the throne saw everything. Its hunger changed. No longer blind. Directed. It opened its jaws and inhaled. The stolen fire tore free from the nobles who had fed on it. Not their flesh. Their theft. Gold streams ripped from rings, chains, seals, and hidden brands beneath silk sleeves. Some collapsed. Some wept. Some clawed at empty throats as the power they had called loyalty abandoned them. The fire poured into the dragon. Its dull scales brightened. One wing broke through the floor, then the other. The Ember Hall shook as the royal dragon rose behind the shattered throne, no longer skeletal, not fully healed, but alive enough to cast Vaelor's shadow across the entire court. Orinth screamed. The gray ribbon burned away in Mira's hands. The first vow was gone. For one breath, she felt weightless. Then her body failed. Vaelor caught her before she hit the floor. This time, he did not merely steady her. He held her against him, one arm beneath her shoulders, the other protecting her burning hands from the shattered glass beneath them. The starving flame curled weakly around Mira's fingers. Not starving now. Resting. Below, the dragon lowered its enormous head toward the balcony until one golden eye filled the doorway behind Orinth. The counselor tried to rise. The dragon exhaled once. Blue-white fire wrapped around him, not burning his body, but stripping every stolen oath from his skin. Black symbols surfaced across his throat, wrists, chest, and heart marks of every vow he had poisoned. Vaelor looked down at him. What judgment does the flame choose? Mira's vision blurred. Still. She heard the little flame dragon whisper, "Let him feel hunger." Vaelor's face hardened. The dragon opened its jaws. Orinth's fire vanished. Not his life. His power. His borrowed warmth. His stolen command. The crimson-robed counselor fell to the floor, shivering like a man abandoned in winter. And far below, every slave brand in the Ember Hall cracked with blue-white light. Every slave brand in the Ember Hall cracked at once. Not loudly. That made it worse. The sound was delicate, almost beautiful. like ice breaking across a frozen lake. One by one, blue-white lines split through the old burn marks on wrists, shoulders, throats, and backs. Servants cried out, not in pain, but in shock. Chains fell loose. Bronze collars opened. Debt marks that had lasted longer than childhood's peeled from skin like dead ash. Mira stared through blurred vision. Her own shoulder burned. For years, the debt mark there had been part of her body. A circle of bronze fire branded into her skin when she was too young to understand that poverty could be inherited like blood. It had named her property of the lower ash cells. It had told guards where to return her if she ran. It had told nobles she was a thing already paid for by someone else's suffering. Now the mark split. Blue-white flame entered the scar. Mira gasped and arced in Vaelor's arms. He tightened his hold, but did not restrain her. "Mira, it's breaking," she whispered. His eyes dropped to her shoulder. The debt mark dissolved beneath torn fabric, leaving only new skin touched by faint ember light. Below them, the Ember Hall became something no court had ever prepared for. Slaves standing upright without marks to tell them where to kneel. No one knew what to do. The nobles looked more frightened of freed servants than they had of dragonfire. Orinth lay near the bronze doors, shivering beneath the dragon's eye. His ruby rings had gone black. His crimson robes, once bright with stolen flame, hung dull as old blood. He tried to lift his hand toward the nobles below. No one came. That was the first honest thing the court had done all night. Vaelor looked down from the balcony. Mira still held against him. By royal flame and living witness, every debt brand fed through the first vow is void. Arwar rose, not from nobles, from the ash cell servants. It was not celebration yet. It was disbelief finding sound. Some sank to their knees because their legs failed. Others clutched bare wrists and sobbed. A girl no older than 12 stared at her unmarked palm, as if someone had returned a name she had never learned to speak. Mira's throat tightened. She had thought freedom would feel like opening wings. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, realizing the cage had been the only shape she knew. Vaelor felt her shaking. "Sit. I can stand. You can barely breathe. I have breathed worse." His jaw tightened, but he did not argue. He set her carefully on her feet, keeping one hand near her back until she found balance. That restraint unsettled her. He was a king surrounded by a broken court, a risen dragon, and freed slaves, yet he was watching whether her knees would hold. The starving flame, smaller now, curled around Mira's fingers like a tired creature. Its blue-white body was fuller than before, no longer gray at the edges, but it still trembled. Vaelor's dragon lowered its massive head to the balcony. Mira froze. Its golden eye was larger than her whole body. Scars crossed the scales around it, not from battle, but from binding. The dragon breathed once, warm enough to stir her hair, careful enough not to scorch a thread of her dress. "Thank you, Ember-Vow child." The words entered the hall through flame, not sound. Every noble heard them. Mira lowered her eyes without meaning to. The dragon rumbled. "Do not bow to hunger that fed from you." Slowly, Mira lifted her head. Vaelor looked at his dragon, as if grief and awe had struck him in the same place. "Can you return fully?" The dragon's eye shifted toward him. "Not while poisoned vows remain." The hall stilled. Orinth laughed weakly from the floor. "There are always more vows." Vaelor turned toward him. The counselor smiled through chattering teeth. "You broke the first chain, yes. Beautiful. Dramatic. But every noble house swore private embers. War embers. Marriage embers. Tribute embers. You think hunger lives in one ribbon? I taught them to feed in secret." Mira felt the starving flame stir. Below, some nobles began stepping backward. Vaelor saw. His voice cut through the hall. "Seal the exits." Dragon Knights hesitated. Not from disobedience. From uncertainty. Half the men they served had just been revealed as thieves of royal fire. Vaelor's dragon opened one wing. That solved the uncertainty. The exits were sealed. Lady Caressa, pale and furious, lifted her chin. "Your Majesty, if you burn every house that signed old vows, there will be no court left to govern." Mira looked down at her. "Maybe that is why the kingdom has been starving." A silence followed. It was not the silence of fear alone. It was the silence after a slave says what everyone else has survived by not saying. Vaelor's gaze moved to Mira. There it was again, that dangerous attention. Not ownership, not pity, something sharper. As if every time she spoke truth, the dragon inside him woke another inch. Lady Caressa's eyes narrowed. "You let ash, sell filth speak over noble blood?" The starving flame snapped upright in Mira's hand. Vaelor descended the balcony stairs slowly. Mira followed because the flame pulled her, and because she refused to be left above like a rescued thing. When they reached the hall floor, Vaelor faced Lady Caressa in front of everyone. "Say that again," he said. The noblewoman faltered. He stepped closer. "No? Then hear me once. The next person in this hall who calls her filth will answer to my dragon before her flame reaches them." Mira's breath caught. The words should have felt protective. They did, but they also frightened her. Protection from a king could become another cage if she let gratitude blind her. Vaelor turned slightly, as if sensing that thought. His voice lowered, for her alone. That was not a claim. Mira looked at him. Then what was it? His golden eyes held hers. A warning to people who have forgotten fear should face upward. Before she could answer, the starving flame screamed. Every hidden oath in the hall ignited at once. Not on the nobles' throats. Inside the dragon throne's broken roots. Blue-white fire shot through the floor channels, revealing hundreds of black veins beneath the palace, all leading away from the Ember Hall toward the lower ash cells. Mira stepped back. Her old prison. The place where her mother had died. The dragon's voice darkened. "The deepest hunger is below." Orinth smiled from the floor. Lips blue with cold. Now she learns why her mother was really sold. The lower ash cells had not been opened to the Dragon King in 12 years. That was the first truth the palace revealed. Vaelor stood at the head of the black stairwell beneath the Ember Hall, staring down into a darkness that smelled of wet stone, old smoke, and bodies worked past mercy. Behind him, his dragon's golden light filled the broken throne room above, but it did not reach far into the steps. Something below swallowed brightness before it could descend. Mira knew that hunger. She had slept inside it. The starving flame curled around her fingers, tense and alert. It no longer trembled like a dying thing, but it did not burn freely either. The blue-white fire narrowed each time the black veins beneath the floor pulsed toward the lower cells. Vaelor looked at her. "You do not have to go down." Mira almost smiled. Not because the offer was kind, because it showed how little he understood the shape of old wounds. "I was raised down there." His jaw tightened. "That is not the same as choosing to return." "No," she said. "It is not." Then she stepped onto the first stair. Vaelor followed. So did his dragon's shadow, vast and golden, crawling along the ceiling above them like a storm trying to fit inside a tunnel. Behind them, Orinth was dragged by 2 dragon knights, powerless, shivering, but smiling as if every step downward proved some final victory. Lady Caressa and the exposed nobles were forced to follow under guard. Mira did not look back often. The starving flame did that for her. It tasted their hidden fear and fed her flashes of it. Secret ledgers, blood-sealed tribute, children counted as debt, ash cell workers marked as fuel labor. Fuel, not servants, not citizens. Fuel. At the bottom of the stairs, the iron doors to the ash cells stood sealed with 7 dragon locks. Mira knew those locks. She had scrubbed around them as a child, had wondered why the doors were locked from the outside and the inside, had once asked her mother why free air smelled different beyond them. Her mother had only pressed a soot-stained finger to her lips. Vaelor lifted a hand toward the locks. They did not open. Orinth laughed softly. Royal command does not rule Deathfire. Mira turned. What does? The counselor's eyes glittered. The first owner. The starving flame flared. A memory struck the door. Mira saw her mother, younger than Mira had ever known her, standing before the same locks with a newborn in her arms. She had dark hair, tired eyes, and a burn mark on her palm shaped like a small blue flame. A noble clerk held out a contract, while Orinth, younger and unmarked by age, watched from the shadows. Sign, the clerk said, or the child pays the mine debt in blood. Mira's mother looked at the baby. Mira knew before the memory showed it. Herself. The woman pressed her burned palm to the contract. Blue-white light flashed. The door opened. The vision vanished. Mira could not breathe. My mother signed me into slavery? Orinth smiled. Your mother saved you from execution. Vaelor's voice went low. Explain. She was Ember-Vow, Orinth said. The last before this one. She discovered the lower cells were feeding royal fire long before Prince Oral did. When she threatened to expose us, we offered mercy. Her silence, for the child's life. Mira stared at him. The words cut strangely, not cleanly, not like betrayal. Her mother had not sold her for greed, or cowardice, or indifference. She had traded her own name, her own freedom, and Mira's future because death had been standing closer. That did not make the chain lighter. It made it harder to hate. The starving flame whispered against her skin. She left you a key. Mira looked at her palm. The small blue flame mark that had burned on her mother in the memory now glowed faintly beneath Mira's skin. Vaelor saw it. Your blood opens the locks. No, Mira said, understanding with a chill. Her vow does. She pressed her palm to the first dragon lock. The iron screamed, not from force, from recognition. One by one, the locks opened, each releasing a breath of black smoke. When the seventh lock broke, the doors groaned inward. The lower ash cells lay beyond. Rows of workers stood in silence. Men, women, children, all marked with bronze brands, all staring at Mira as if she had walked out of a story their mothers had whispered and their masters had beaten out of them. Then an old woman near the front dropped to her knees. Ember-Vow, she whispered. The words spread, not loudly, reverently. Mira stepped back, shaken. Do not kneel. The old woman lifted her face, tears cutting lines through ash. We are not kneeling to you, child. We are kneeling because the doors opened. Vaelor moved beside Mira. The workers saw him and flinched. Every one of them. The Dragon King noticed. Something in his face hardened, not at them, but at the kingdom that had taught them to fear his shadow more than their chains. He turned to the guards. Break every brand ledger. Open every cell. Orinth laughed behind them. You still do not see it. The cells are not merely prisons, they are roots. The black veins beneath the floor pulsed. The walls answered. Deep under the ash cells, something moved. Not a dragon, not flame. A massive, hollow heartbeat. The starving flame went cold in Mira's hands. The old woman's eyes widened with terror. The hunger pit. Vaelor looked at her. What is that? She whispered. Where are they buried? The first Ember-Vow heart. Orinth smiled. And below them, the floor split open. The floor split open beneath the lower ash cells. Not violently, carefully, as if the palace had been waiting years to reveal a wound and no longer had strength to scream. Black stone cracked in a wide circle at the center of the chamber. Ash slid into the opening in thin gray streams. Workers scrambled back, clutching children one another. Broken chains. Vaelor caught Mira by the arm before the edge gave way under her bare feet, but he released her the moment she found balance. Below them, darkness breathed. It was not empty. That was the horror of it. Something pulsed far beneath the ash cells, deep and slow, like a heart too large for any human chest. Each beat drew the blue-white flame in Mira's hands downward. Each beat made the black veins in the floor brighten, then dim. The old woman who had named the hunger pit began to weep. They said it was a furnace. Orinth laughed from behind the guards. It was. Vaelor turned on him. What is buried there? Orinth's eyes moved to Mira. Ask the flame's little heir. Her blood remembers. Mira hated him for being right. The starving flame crawled up her wrists, then pressed itself into the blue mark in her palm. Pain opened through her not burning, but memory forced awake. The chamber vanished. She saw the lower cells as they had been centuries ago, not yet a prison, but a sanctuary carved beneath the palace. Ember-Vow women and men stood in a circle around a great living flame. At its center knelt a woman with hair the color of dark copper and eyes full of blue-white fire. The first Ember-Vow. She held both hands over her heart. Around her, dragon kings and nobles argued in shadows. The royal flame must obey the crown, one king said. No, the Ember-Vow woman answered. Fire must obey truth. A king fed by false loyalty becomes a tyrant. A court fed by stolen fire becomes a grave. The vision shifted. Screams. The sanctuary becoming a prison. The first Ember-Vow woman forced to kneel over the pit while nobles carved oath runes into the stone. They did not kill her quickly. They bound her heart to the palace roots, so her bloodline's magic could keep tasting loyalty forever. Then twisted that gift into a hunger engine beneath the throne. Mira fell back into herself with a gasp. Vaelor caught her again, his face tight with fury. What did you see? My bloodline did not make the hunger pit, she whispered. They used us to build it. The workers cried out softly. Orinth's smile faded at last. Mira looked at the black opening. The first Ember-Vow heart is still down there. The starving flame trembled. Free her. The words passed through every flame in the chamber. Vaelor heard them too. His dragon's shadow pressed along the walls, enormous and restless. How? The old woman answered before Mira could. No king can open the heart chamber. That was the old protection. Only the blood they enslaved can reach it. Vaelor's jaw set. Then I go with her. No, Mira said. His eyes flashed. This is beneath my throne, and it was built from my blood. The words came sharper than she intended. He absorbed them without anger. That made it harder. I will not send you into that darkness alone, he said. You are not sending me. The starving flame brightened in Mira's hands, as if it approved the difference. For one breath, the workers behind her were silent. Then, the old woman stepped forward and tore open the front of her ragged dress, revealing a cracked bronze brand over her heart. If the Ember-Vow goes down, she said, we hold the door. One by one, the freed workers did the same. Men, women, even trembling children pressed their hands over their broken brands. Blue-white light answered faintly in each scar. They were not Ember-Vow, but they had fed the same hunger. Vaelor looked at them, and Mira saw shame cross his face like a shadow. Not performative, not noble. The stunned grief of a king discovering how many backs had held up his palace. He turned to the workers and bowed his head. Not deeply. Enough. I did not know, he said. The old woman's voice hardened. Then know now. Vaelor nodded once. I will. Mira stepped toward the pit. The darkness below opened wider, revealing a spiral stair carved into the inner wall. It descended through black veins pulsing with stolen heat. The starving flame moved ahead of her, becoming the small blue-white dragon again, its wings stronger now. Vaelor followed. This time, Mira did not tell him to stop. She looked at him once. If your dragon loses control below, it will answer to me. And if you are wrong? His gaze held hers. Then do what you must." The words were calm, too calm. Mira understood he was giving her permission to survive him. The staircase narrowed as they descended. Above them, the workers began chanting not royal prayers, not noble oaths, but old ash cell names, names of mothers, brothers, children, people counted as fuel who had refused to vanish. The black veins recoiled from the sound. At the bottom, Mira and Vaelor reached a round chamber lit by no torch. At its center hung a heart made of blue-white flame and black iron roots. It was still beating. Around it, thousands of oath threads ran upward into the palace like veins feeding a monster. Mira stepped closer. The heart opened one burning eye. "Daughter," it whispered. Then every oath thread tightened at once around Vaelor's throat. The oath threads tightened around Vaelor's throat. He made no sound at first. That was worse than a scream. His body locked beside Mira in the heart chamber, one hand raised halfway toward the burning heart, gold eyes wide with sudden pain. Black threads pulled from the walls, from the ceiling, from the iron roots wrapped around the first Ember-Vow heart. They coiled around his neck and wrists, sinking through armor as if metal were smoke. Mira reached for him. The starving flame slammed between them, not to stop her, to warn her. If she touched the threads blindly, they would take her too. Vaelor's dragon roared somewhere above, shaking the palace foundations, but the sound arrived muffled, strangled, as if the same threads had wrapped around the beast's throat. Orinth's voice drifted down from the staircase, thin with distance and triumph. "Now you understand. The hunger pit does not only feed from slaves, it protects itself from kings." Mira turned toward the burning heart. The eye inside it watched her. "Daughter," it whispered again. Mira's breath broke. "I am not your daughter. Blood remembers what chains renamed." The words struck deeper than comfort. Mira looked at the heart of the first Ember-Vow and felt the truth of it burning through her. Her mother's vow, her own brand. Every ash cell child counted as debt. Every royal flame starved by lies. All of it had grown from this chamber, from one woman's heart forced to keep tasting loyalty long after her body was gone. Vaelor dropped to one knee. The threads tightened. Mira moved toward him again. His eyes snapped to hers, furious even in pain. "Do not trade yourself for me." The command was ragged, almost pleading. Mira laughed once, broken and breathless. "You still think this is only about you." Something like shame crossed his face. Then the threads pulled harder, and he bowed under them. Mira faced the heart. "What do you want?" The first Ember-Vow's eye burned brighter. "Not sacrifice." The chamber stilled. "Witness." The starving flame unfolded in Mira's hands, becoming the small blue-white dragon. It flew to the heart and pressed its tiny brow against the iron roots. Light spread through the chamber, revealing carvings hidden beneath soot. Thousands of names cut into the floor. Not royal names. Ash cell names. Mothers who had signed false contracts. Children born into debt. Workers burned into silence. Generations fed into the roots so the court above could call its hunger law. Mira stepped into the circle of names. The oath threads recoiled from her feet. She understood then. The first vow had been broken, but the deepest hunger still lived because no one had named what it had eaten. Vaelor struggled to lift his head. "Mira!" She looked at him. In his eyes, she saw a king who had been betrayed, a man with a starving dragon, and something more dangerous than either. Someone who would rather choke than watch her vanish into another royal debt. That almost undid her, but Mira had not come this far, to become another hidden heart beneath a throne. She lifted both burning hands. "I witnessed the first theft," she said. The heart chamber answered with a pulse. "I witnessed the Ember-Vow bloodline enslaved beneath royal stone." Another pulse. "I witness every ash." Cell life counted as fuel. The names on the floor ignited, one by one. Above, the workers' chant grew louder, pouring down the staircase like breath returning to a body. Mira's voice shook, but did not break. I witnessed the dragon court fed by stolen hunger, and I refuse to let another child inherit a chain disguised as debt. The burning heart opened fully. Inside it, Mira saw the first Ember-Vow woman, not monstrous, not ancient, not hungry. A woman on her knees with iron roots through her chest, holding the last shape of herself together for centuries, because no one had ever spoken the truth in the chamber that killed her. Tears blurred Mira's vision. The woman smiled. Then release me. Mira reached forward. Vaelor surged against the threads. Mira! No! She did not take the heart into herself. She placed the starving flame against it. The small flame dragon opened its mouth and breathed blue-white fire into the iron roots. Not to burn the heart, to burn the chains. The chamber exploded with light. Every oath thread around Vaelor snapped at once. He fell forward, gasping, one hand braced against the floor. Above them, his dragon roared freely, and this time the roar was not hunger. It was grief, rage, life. The iron roots melted from the Ember-Vow heart. The woman inside the fire lifted both hands. Thousands of names rose from the floor in streams of blue-white sparks, flying upward through the palace roots, through the ash cells, through the Ember Hall into the open night above the dragon court. Every slave brand broke. Every debt ledger burned. Every private ember tied to stolen labor went dark. Orinth screamed from the stairwell. Not from flame, from emptiness. The last of his borrowed power tore out of him and flew into the rising names. When Vaelor and Mira climbed back to the lower ash cells, they found him collapsed on the steps, alive, powerless, shivering as if every stolen fire had left him colder than death. Vaelor stopped before him. Orinth looked up, lips blue. Kill me then. Vaelor's dragon shadow filled the wall behind him. For a moment, Mira thought he would. Then Vaelor glanced at her, not asking permission, remembering. Death is too warm for you, he said. Orinth's face changed. Vaelor turned to the guards. Take him to the ash cells. The freed workers went silent. The king's voice hardened. Not as their master. As the first man sentenced to rebuild what he fed from. No title. No flame. No oath. Chain. He eats when they eat. He sleeps where they allow. And every name he erased will be spoken to him until he remembers all of them. The old woman from the ash cells stepped forward. We will decide where he sleeps. Vaelor bowed his head. Yes? That one word moved through the chamber like another broken lock. By dawn, the dragon court had changed shape. The Ember Hall was filled, not with nobles in gold, but with ash cell workers standing beneath open doors. Some still trembled. Some held children. Some stared at the sky, as if freedom might vanish if they blinked. Vaelor stood before the cracked throne, his dragon no longer trapped inside it, but coiled behind him in living gold. Its scales were still scarred, its wings still thin from starvation, but its eyes were awake. Mira stood several steps away, the starving flame resting in her palms. It was no longer starving. It burned small and steady, blue-white and alive. Vaelor faced the court. Every debt brand in Drakkar is void, he said. Every house that fed from the hunger pit will return land, coin, and labor owed. Every oath to the throne will be remade under open flame. No vow will bind my fire unless truth can survive inside it. A noble began to protest. Vaelor's dragon lifted its head. The protest died. Then Vaelor turned to Mira. The hall watched too closely. Mira hated that. Hated the sudden weight of every gaze searching for a claim, a reward, a romance they could name before she understood it herself. Vaelor seemed to know. He did not reach for her. He lowered himself to one knee before the entire dragon court. A sound passed through the hall. The Dragon King bowed his head to the slave girl who had held his starving flame and refused to become another sacrifice. Mira Ember-Vow, he said, giving her a name no chain had ever allowed. You are free. More than free. You are witness of the first hunger, breaker of the false vow, and keeper of the flame no court will command again. Her throat tightened. I do not know how to be that. His golden eyes lifted to hers. Then be Mira first. The answer broke something softer in her than pain had ever reached. The starving flame curled around her wrist, warm and quiet. And you? She asked. Vaelor's mouth tightened, almost a smile, almost grief. I learn how to be a king whose dragon no longer needs to starve to obey. His dragon lowered its enormous head beside him. Mira stepped closer, not because the court watched, not because he knelt, because for the first time, the space between them did not feel like a chain. Vaelor held out his hand, palm up, waiting. Mira looked at it for a long moment. Then she placed the starving flame between them. Both of their hands closed around its light. It burned neither of them. Outside, dawn touched the red glass walls of the dragon court. Blue-white sparks drifted upward from the broken ash cells like freed souls returning to the sky. The old hunger beneath the palace had gone silent, and in that silence, Mira heard the first Ember-Vow woman whisper one final word. Leave. Mira lifted her head. The flame in her hands rose, not starving now, but singing.